For more than a quarter of a century, the case of Pinar Selek has haunted Turkey's courts and human rights defenders around the world. A feminist, sociologist, and outspoken anti-militarist, Selek has faced repeated prosecutions and life-threatening charges despite the absence of evidence. It begins in 1998 when she was first arrested for her academic research on the Kurdish issue. And after refusing to disclose the name of her Kurdish contacts, she was imprisoned and tortured. Soon after, she was falsely linked to an explosion at Istanbul's spice market, even though forensic experts confirmed the blast was caused by a gas leak, not a bomb. What followed was a judicial order that seems endless. 4 separate acquittals, each overturned by prosecutors or higher courts, and a conviction to life imprisonment later annulled. Despite courts repeatedly acknowledging that there is no evidence against her, new trials have been launched again and again, with arrest warrants still hanging over her head. She now resides in France, but the persecution didn't stop. The Turkish justice system continues to bring up her case, and according to the solidarity groups with Pinar Selek, it has been politically targeting her for over 25 years. They say this politically motivated trial for terrorism represents one of the most extreme forms of infringement on freedom of expression and academic freedom, which are threatened today worldwide. You're listening to The Divide. My name is Iris Xu. Today we're meeting with someone who's been documenting the stories of exiled scholars, bringing their stories to light.
Pascale Laborier. I am professor for political science in Nanterre. I'm working at the campus Condorcet, leading the program Universities in Exile.
I looked into your research, and as a political scientist, you've researched the stories of exiled academics around the world and advocate for them, specifically the Turkish sociologist and writer Pinar Selek, a refugee in France. Can you tell us about her story?
Yes, it's a very sad story. So Pinar Selek, she's a sociologist, a colleague from Turkey, and she's also now a writer. And when she was young in Turkey, she was worked about minority group like Kurdish communities, LGBTQ people, and so on. And because of that, she became the target of political persecutions. She was in jail. It was 27 years ago. And since then, she had 5 trials in Turkey. And she has to flee Turkey because if not, she will be still in jail. And now she lives in France since many years. She became an assistant professor at the university in Nice, so near Italy. And on the 21st of October, it will be the next trial of Pinar Selek in Istanbul. And a lot of my colleagues will be there to testify of the solidarity, because she cannot travel there, because if she travel for her trial, it means she will be in jail immediately. So her story is really one of resilience and courage. So I am personally involved in our community in France, and we try also to organize events. During that trial, we are all together with her to support her and make events. And the many leaders of our university are also supported that situation. But the situation is really worse because she's in France, and if she's in a conference about a scientific topic, then the French universities have attacks from Turkish group about that.
Now, courts have acquitted Pinar Selek for 4 times.
The accusation was of terrorism. What's happened? It was an explosion on a market. But she was not on that market. First, she was in another place asking from the police, so she couldn't not be there. And second point, it was not a terrorist act. So there are many evidences that it was just all gas bottle what exploded. But there's still, with the allegation, she was a terrorist. So and again, after each trial, after each acquittement, there's a new trial again. Since 25 years. You can imagine what is it for someone like that. It means that you cannot go to visit her family in Turkey. It means that she's under surveillance from the extreme right movement in France. And also she has a limitation to her academic freedom because France protect her. She was a refugee. Now she's also French citizen. But for Turkey, she's a Turkish citizen, and not all the European country can assure a protection if the Turkish government asks to bring her to Turkey again for that trial.
Why are French extreme right surveilling her?
No, sorry, it's Turkish.
Oh, Turkish. Turkish.
Yes, Turkish.
I see. It sounds like it is a campaign to silence her.
Yes. She's a very exceptional person, what courage, what resilience. And she talking to many different kind of people. She's not only talking to academic people, she's talking to local association. She's very concerned by feminists and different kind of topic, and she's now well famous, so that's why she's in the middle of this attack. She's not the only one who is persecuted. There are some colleagues or intellectuals or journalists that are in prison, in jail. Or in 2017 there are many colleagues that lost their job and they could not more work in Turkey. But in the opinion or in the press, she's a terrorist. So they maintain that fake news, she's a terrorist. And that they make repressive politics to eliminate terrorist activists. But that's not the case.
I want to ask you about, can you walk me through the conditions and the difficulties these exile scholars face when they move to another country? I assume they don't have a lot of resources with them when they flee the countries.
Yes, you're right. The exile scholars face very precarious conditions because you have to mean that sometimes they should leave their country from one day to the other day without to know why. So I have an example of a woman. She was a prestigious academic in literature in Iran many years ago. And there were a demonstration. And an American journalist wrote about a woman in the demonstration, but he didn't translate exactly the name. So it was the name of that colleague, what he wrote. So this colleague, she's have many friends. They were coming to her home to say, okay, someone spoke about you on the radio, you must go. So she was living from one day to the other day to Germany through different roads without know why she will be persecuted. Or in Turkey it was the same. So 800 person was dismissed without passport, without the possibility to go away. So it means they go from one day with a boat from Turkey to Greece. Some of them were in retention camp. It means that they face the difficulties, usually ordinary difficulties of many refugees. So it seems that exile scholars are very highly skilled person or refugee, but they face the same difficulties. And when they come, they must rebuild some professional network and qualification, but sometimes the language could be a barrier because they publish in their own language, for example. And when they come to our country, so we cannot read what they wrote before, so it's very difficult to appreciate their academic careers. Or sometimes the qualification system are different. For example, the case of archaeologists from Afghanistan, they can lead research department, practical field work, but there were no PhD in that country for archaeology. So it's been when they came, they are like master students for us. So that's why we should help our colleagues to make a new career or to maintain their competencies. But it's not also change a country suddenly. It's also let friends and family for some of them. And it's mean also reinventing new research, because it's not you take your computer or your pen, you come from a country, you go to the other country, because the research topic are different, the research priority are different from the country, and the styles of the academic are different also, or expectation.
I assume a lot of them are forced to give up their dreams.
Yes. Different kind of threat. It can be life. So we saw all the video in Palmyra in 2015 about the execution of the archaeologists in Palmyra. So it was crazy. So they can be targeted specifically as researcher because they are working about something particular. And in the dictatorship, intellectual, journalists, academics are targeted the first. But sometimes there are also in situations like Ukraine or Gaza coming with the whole population of that country.
From your interactions with these exile scholars, how are they dealing with, I assume they must be traumatized by either the journey or what happened to them in the country. Are they being offered any resources to deal with the PTSD?
Yes, it's a very important question, because that's not only the fact that the science practical is not the same from a country to other country, but it's also the post-traumatic syndrome. And so, for example, now we're expecting people from Gaza since many months. We try to make evacuation from Gaza because we're waiting the colleagues with contract and their family. And how to work after such a situation, because it will not only the trauma syndrome, but also the health condition. And sometimes people should have find some help to recover the health and to recover the psychological condition. And that's why it's very difficult to help colleagues in that situation, because on one hand we try to maintain them in their academic biotop, to help them to continue their research. But the other hand, they are in such psychological situation, and not only them, their whole family, that we should help them like other refugees. And I'm thinking about Sudan. It's also a very difficult situation. All that war situation is difficult. And for the colleagues who were specifically targeted in many dictatorships, so they are also become paranoid with right, because some are still under surveillance from their own country in France, so like Pinar Selek, for example. So we try to help them as we can.
So are French authorities doing anything about this cross-border harassment by the Turkish authorities?
Yes, they are protection.
And France has a state grant for exile scientists and artists, which is very unique. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, There, since 2016 and 2017, two European programs in Germany and in France. The Philip Schwartz Initiative for Germany, and for France, the PAUSE program. It's mean program for with academic authorities in emergency. And what we propose in France is to help university to propose a short work contract, not grants, work contracts for 1 to 2 years, and with the visa to come. And our diplomatics unit helped the people come to France. For example, our embassy in Greece helps the people in retention camps in Greece from Turkey to come to Paris or to France elsewhere. And since 2017 until now, it was 800 contract, because
Wow.
it should be a fast-track contract. So they have in their curriculum a line of a work contract at the university. So that program pay 60% of the work contract and the university 40%, but give all support, psychological support, help for language facilities and so on.
I see. Wow, that's amazing. Can you tell us how you got into this research and this work?
In the States or in the UK, such grants program exists since 1 century. But not only to keep people to the States or UK, but elsewhere in the world. And the exile scholars, it's a very common topic in the research. And when we create that program in France, it was created in 2017, but we have 2 years to create that, so 18 months to create that new public policy. There were not so much work about that exile, academic exile, high-scale exile. There are many work on migration, many work on refugees, many work about refugees in the States during the Second World War, but not so much about a century of what is an exile scholar. So it means that people have some representation about that, so that they are the refugee, but exile scholar, they are an elite. But it's not true if you see the reality of what happened. And it's very important to have academic reflection and production on it, because it's interesting to learn how that moment of war, political contract, impact the academic research and trajectory. And sometimes you mean, you say you have an exile from Ukraine, from Russia, from elsewhere, but what does this mean? For example, for colleagues from Ukraine, what's happened? It was not that the colleagues were thinking, it will be a war during 2, 3, 4 or more years, we don't know. At the beginning, some women were just crossed the border to Romania and were waiting. They were waiting, perhaps it's an affair for 1 or 2 weeks, but it was not the case. So they go then to another place, but then they have to live, to work, to eat. So they go to Bucharest because the men were in the war. So, for example, some come to France after 6 months, for example, and perhaps somewhere else, because they have to suddenly ask, where can I live with my child in peace? And they want to come back to their country when it's possible. So you're not, to be exiled, it's not a permanent condition, it's not an identity. You're suddenly exiled, but nobody thinks you are going to exile. What is important to know is that it seems a privileged policy to scholars, but you have to think that to be an academic, it means to be a high-skilled worker. And it's more difficult to integrate another academic market with such high level of competencies.
Thank you for listening. This episode of The Divide is produced by Radio Taiwan International.